My boyfriend's obsession was to have a kid, but he was infertile, so he tricked his identical twin into getting me pregnant. I gave myself completely to Rocco that night, fully aware he wasn't Renzo. The next morning, I complimented my real boyfriend. Babe, you were amazing last night. I've never felt that satisfied before. His face went completely drained of color like I'd slapped him. Behind that frozen expression, I saw it, that flicker of something. Guilt, fear, jealousy. Who do you like better? Your boyfriend in bed last night, or the one making you breakfast right now? I wrapped my arms around his and smiled like a love-struck newlywed. I love how gentle you are in the daylight, but last night, I giggled. I really liked that wild version of you. At the breakfast table, Renzo looked oddly brightened up as he turned to the man sitting beside him. Bro, Susie made this coffee herself. You should really try it. As he spoke, he pushed a steaming cup of coffee toward his older brother, who had just returned from Norway. Across the table, I looked up at Rocco. He was dressed in a black business suit, hair still slightly damp from a morning shower. The crystal chandelier above the dining room cast a soft glow over him, making his features more defined. Handsome didn't even begin to cover it. He didn't say a word. His lips were pressed into a line, his blue eyes unreadable. And just like that, everything came rushing back. I had been reborn. In my previous life, Renzo had drugged his brother and tricked him into sleeping with me. He was desperate for me to get pregnant, all because he couldn't have kids himself. He needed the baby to win his grandfather's favor and secure his share of the inheritance. And it worked. After I got pregnant, he used the child to get 60% of the PWL Corp shares. But once he had what he wanted, he locked me up in a basement and tormented me day after day like I was useless. I never understood why, until the day his mistress threw acid in my face and spat out the truth. The baby wasn't his. It was his brother's. To him, I was ruined. A walking stain on his perfect image. Just like me, our child was a disgrace. Renzo couldn't stand the sight of us. In the end, I set that basement on fire, trapping him and his mistress in the flames. Renzo, his mistress, and I, none of us made it out alive. Back at the table, Renzo's voice broke through my thoughts. Come on, bro. Take a sip. Don't let Susie's effort go to waste. I looked at his overly eager face and suddenly felt sick to my stomach. That coffee. I obviously made it for him. But here he was, acting like it was some kind of offering for another guy. In my past life, I thought the brothers were just close. Now, I could see it for what it really was. A setup. One piece in a bigger plan. Really? If she made it herself? Rocco said after a beat, his eyes locked on mine. How could I say no? He picked up the cup and took a sip. That was when another memory came flooding back. I was back in the fire. The smoke, the heat, the pain, and him, tearing through the flames to get to me. He'd held me tightly, his voice trembling as he whispered, Susie, Susie, hang on, I'm here, I'll get you out. But the fire was too strong. None of us made it. At the very end, when the smoke and heat had nearly taken everything, he was still holding me, his arms wrapped around me as he leaned in close and murmured against my cheek, Susie, I love you. Back in the present, I didn't cling to Renzo like I had in my last life. Instead, I turned to Rocco with a warm smile and said softly, if you like it, I can make one more cup for you. As soon as I offered that, both guys turned their heads to look at me. Rocco didn't react much, but Renzo's expression twitched for a second, like something about my words caught him off guard. Still, he didn't say anything, just pressed his lips together and kept quiet. That night, as I passed by the study after my shower, I noticed a soft light leaking through the cracked door. Inside, Chiara Illich, Renzo's childhood sweetheart, was perched on his desk, tugging playfully at his tie. Renzo, she said with a teasing smirk, are you seriously gonna let your brother sleep with Susie? She let go of the tie and tilted her head. I mean, I remember how hard you chased after her back then. It hasn't been that long. You really don't mind just handing her over? Renzo grabbed her waist and leaned in to kiss her. His lips landed right on her bright red mouth. You gotta give something up to catch the big prize, he said with against her mouth. I've always been second to my brother. If I don't beat him to it, get a kid first and let grandpa hold a great-grandchild, then I'll never matter in his eyes. And anyway, Renzo said with a smug grin, I've already had a taste of Susie. Honestly, nothing special. Just average. You though. His finger slid down Chiara's collarbone. You're spicy. You give me the thrill. Laughter erupted between them, low and dirty. The two practically melted into each other, tangled up in kisses. I stood frozen just outside the room, my fists clenched tight at my sides, but I held it down. Going off on him now would be like throwing myself at a brick wall. It would only hurt me. The Powells were one of the most powerful in Manchester. And me, I was just a broke college student in my third year, just a nobody. If Renzo wanted to get rid of me, he could do it as easily as stepping on a bug. I knew that because he'd already done it once. In my last life, I tried everything. Ran away, begged for help, even called the cops. But nothing worked. I was always dragged right back to him. So this time, I kept my head down, pressed my back to the wall, and crept down the hallway, back to the bedroom. My feet barely made a sound against the floor. When I slipped into the room, I could still hear the faint sound of their moaning behind me. My chest tightened. Renzo had known I was in the shower. And still, he brought Chiara into the study and did that with her. That alone showed he didn't see me as his girlfriend. Not even close. Lying on the bed, I could almost feel the heat of that fire from my past life crawling up my skin again. The agony, the helplessness, the hatred. It came rushing back. I swallowed hard, shoved the memories down, and grabbed the blow dryer. After drying my hair, I climbed into bed and turned on my side. My fingers curled into the blanket, my eyes wide open in the dark. My jaw tightened. I wasn't going to let this life go the same way. I'd find a way out, whatever it took. Minutes passed. Then I heard footsteps stumbling in the hallway, slow and heavy. Hey, wrong room, bro. It's this one, Renzo's voice said with a laugh. Soon, the door creaked open. I kept my back to the door, pretending to sleep, even as I heard Renzo guide a clearly drunk Rocco into the room. The door creaked open. Footsteps stopped just inside. There was a pause, long enough to make my skin crawl, then the sound of Renzo's low, satisfied exhale. I didn't need to see his face to know he was pleased. Maybe it was the empty glass on the nightstand, or the sight of me curled tightly under the blanket, playing my part. Then came his voice, smug and casual. This is your room, bro. Now get some asleep. I felt the mattress shift as Rocco dropped down beside me. A clean, bitter orange scent filled the air. His cologne, faint and unfamiliar. The door clicked shut behind Renzo as he left, careful not to make a sound. But the next second, something was off. The man beside me suddenly sat upright. His back was straight, his eyes fixed on the ceiling like he was wide awake. My eyes narrowed. Didn't he drink the whole cup of coffee? Shouldn't he be knocked out by now? That thought startled me, so I sat up like he'd woken me. Renzo? I mumbled sleepily, rubbing my eyes. Why'd you come in so late? Rocco turned his head slowly to look at me. Moonlight filtered through the window, lighting up his face. His eyes were cold, sharp, and something else I couldn't quite place. I scooted closer and wrapped my arms around him. You weren't here, and I got scared. I had this horrible nightmare, I said softly, pressing my cheek to his shoulder. He stiffened in my embrace but didn't move away. I watched his face carefully. He doesn't look dazed or drugged at all, so he's faking it. He knows what's going on. Then why go along with it? I contemplated. Does he actually like me? Besides, back in my last life, he died with me, voluntarily. I couldn't be sure what he felt now, but I knew one thing. I had to hold on to whatever this was. It might be the only shot I had at surviving. Leaning in, I brushed my lips against the corner of his mouth. Renzo, I want you, I whispered. I caught his eyes flickering. Then he grabbed my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. What did you just call me? I blinked my round almond-shaped eyes, pretending not to understand. What? I called you? Renzo? His brows drew together. Call me babe, he said. I froze. What? I could feel my face flush instantly. He leaned in closer, his teeth grazing my lower lip. Be good, he murmured. Call me babe, and I'll give you what you want. I bit my lip, then lowered my head. Like a good girl, I whispered, be babe. In that instant, it was like a match had been struck.
The single word seemed to snap the last thread of restraint inside him. Babe, Rocco repeated quietly, as if testing how it sounded on his tongue. His thumb brushed lightly against my jaw before he released me. Good. I lowered my gaze to hide the storm in my eyes. So he really knew. He knew I wasn't calling him Renzo anymore. He knew exactly whose room this was. And he knew his brother had deliberately pushed him inside. Neither of us said another word. Outside the bedroom door, the floorboards creaked ever so slightly. Renzo. He was listening. The realization hit me instantly. He wanted proof. He wanted to hear us together. Whether it was to convince himself the plan had succeeded or simply to satisfy his twisted curiosity, I didn't know. Rocco must have noticed it too. Without warning, he reached over and switched off the bedside lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. His lips came close to my ear. So, your boyfriend wants to eavesdrop. His voice was barely above a breath. You know, I knew before I walked through the door. I looked up sharply. You drank the coffee. I poured it into the plant outside the study. My heart skipped. So you weren't drugged? No. Then why come? A long silence followed. Finally he answered. Because I wanted to know whether you were part of it. My chest tightened. I wasn't. I know. You know? I've spent years watching my brother lie. His voice remained calm, but every word carried quiet anger. People who scheme always look at each other before they act. You never looked at him. I stared at him in disbelief. He had figured it out just from that? Outside the door another faint shift of footsteps sounded. Renzo was still there. Rocco suddenly wrapped an arm around my waist. I tensed. Relax, he whispered. We're putting on a show. Before I could react, he deliberately pulled the blanket higher, making it rustle loudly. Then, in a voice just loud enough to travel through the door, he murmured, You should get some sleep. You're exhausted. I caught on immediately. I let out a sleepy hum and rested my forehead against his shoulder. The room fell silent again. Several seconds later, the footsteps outside finally retreated. Renzo had left. Only then did Rocco remove his arm. He'll think everything went according to plan. I nodded slowly, which means he'll move to the next step. And what's that? He'll arrange for me to get pregnant. A dangerous look crossed Rocco's face. He won't. You don't know him. I know him better than anyone. His blue eyes became icy. He believes everyone is a piece on his chessboard. He always forgets. The pieces can choose to stop moving. For the first time since my rebirth, hope flickered inside me. This life was already different. In my previous life, Rocco had never exposed himself this early. He had pretended to be unconscious. He had never admitted he knew. But now, he was standing on my side from the very beginning. Just then, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression turned colder. What is it? I asked. He handed me the phone. The sender was Renzo. Tomorrow morning. Grandpa wants the family together. Bring Susie. Don't forget the medical report. Medical report? I frowned. What report? Rocco's jaw tightened. The fertility examination. My blood ran cold. He looked directly into my eyes. He already forged one in my name. My fingers trembled around the phone. If Grandpa believes you're the fertile one, then when I become pregnant, they'll assume it's Renzo's child. Rocco gave a bitter laugh. Exactly. But here's the problem. He leaned closer. Every word measured. I never took that examination. So, if we expose the fake report, The entire inheritance scheme falls apart before it even begins. I looked at him in stunned silence. The game had changed. Last life, I had been a trapped victim dragged wherever Renzo wanted. This life, before Renzo could use me as his pawn, I had already found his biggest enemy. And, this time, we were going to destroy him together. The next morning, the Power Estate was unusually quiet. Susie and Rocco entered the main hall together, maintaining a careful distance. Anyone watching would think they were simply attending the family gathering as instructed. At the head of the table sat the family patriarch. His sharp eyes swept across everyone before settling on Renzo. So, the old man said, I hear you've finally begun thinking about the future of this family. Renzo smiled confidently. I have, Grandpa. Good. A butler stepped forward carrying several folders. The fertility report, the old man asked. Renzo nodded without hesitation. Already prepared. Before the folder could reach the patriarch, Rocco stood. Don't. Every eye in the room turned toward him. That report is forged. The room fell silent. Renzo's smile froze. What nonsense are you talking about? He laughed. Rocco calmly pulled another folder from his briefcase. I've never taken the examination listed in your report. He placed it on the table. I confirmed yesterday with the hospital. They have no record of me ever being there. The old man's expression darkened. Is this true? Renzo forced a laugh. There must be some mistake. Not just one, Rocco replied. I also requested the hospital's security footage for the date printed on the report. A flash of panic crossed Renzo's face. You what? The footage arrives this afternoon. For the first time, Susie saw genuine fear in Renzo's eyes. His carefully constructed plan was beginning to crack. Then another voice broke the silence. Actually, everyone turned toward the doorway. A middle-aged man in a white coat stepped inside, followed by 2 security officers. I'm the director of the laboratory named on that report. He looked directly at the forged document. My signature was copied. The room erupted into shocked murmurs. The old man's cane slammed against the marble floor. Renzo. His voice was ice cold. Explain yourself. Renzo opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in either lifetime, Susie wasn't the one standing defenseless before the family. This time, Renzo was. Renzo recovered faster than Susie expected. He straightened his suit, forced out a chuckle, and looked toward his grandfather. Someone's clearly trying to frame me. The old man remained expressionless. Frame you? Renzo pointed at Rocco. My brother's been overseas for years. He comes home and immediately accuses me of forging medical records? Doesn't that sound convenient? Several relatives exchanged uncertain glances. The Power family had always viewed the brothers as rivals. Rocco didn't argue. Instead, he slid another document across the table. I expected you'd say that. The family lawyer picked it up first. His eyes widened. This is the laboratory's internal audit, Rocco said evenly. Every report has a digital identification number. He tapped the forged report. This number belongs to a blood test performed 3 years ago on someone else. The lawyer compared the documents. After nearly a minute, he slowly nodded. The identification numbers don't match. Renzo's smile disappeared. Grandfather's cane struck the marble floor. Enough. The room fell silent. I don't care which of you is telling the truth. His gaze swept across both grandsons. I care who lied. He turned toward the family lawyer. Verify every document independently. If either report is forged, his eyes settled on Renzo. The guilty party will lose all authority within the company until this matter is resolved. For the first time, genuine panic flickered across Renzo's face. Temporary suspension meant losing access to board meetings. It meant losing control. It meant months of planning could collapse overnight. Susie noticed his fingers tighten into fists beneath the table. He was cornered, but not defeated. And that made him dangerous. After the meeting ended, Rocco escorted Susie outside. Neither spoke until they reached the estate gardens. You embarrassed him, Susie said quietly. He won't let this go. I know. He'll come after both of us. Rocco stopped walking. He already has. He pointed toward a hedge overlooking the driveway. A tiny flash of reflected sunlight glinted from inside the leaves. Susie narrowed her eyes. A camera? Rocco nodded. Hidden. He walked over, reached into the shrub, and pulled out a thumb-sized wireless camera. It wasn't here yesterday. Susie's stomach sank. So, he's watching us. He wants evidence. Of what? Anything he can twist. Rocco crushed the camera in his hand. We assume from this moment on that every conversation is being recorded. Before Susie could answer, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. Don't trust Rocco. He didn't save you in your last life out of love. He was protecting something that belonged to him. Attached was an old photograph. It showed Rocco standing beside her father, 10 years before she had ever met either brother. Susie's breathing caught. How? She had never seen the picture before. Rocco glanced at the screen. For the first time since they'd reunited, his calm expression cracked. You weren't supposed to find out like this. You knew my father? Rocco was silent. Finally he nodded. Yes. What aren't you telling me? He looked toward the manor, where Renzo was watching from an upstairs window. A secret that's even older than the inheritance. And one Renzo would kill to keep buried. Rocco didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led Susie farther into the gardens until they reached an old stone gazebo, hidden from the manor by towering hedges. Only then did he speak. Your father once worked for my grandfather. Susie's brows knitted together. My father died when I was 12. I know. You knew him? Rocco nodded. He wasn't just an employee. He was Grandpa's most trusted financial advisor. Susie's mind raced. My father never mentioned her family. He couldn't. Rocco's expression hardened. Grandpa required everyone involved in one particular project to sign lifelong confidentiality agreements. What project? Rocco looked back toward the mansion. The original transfer of PWL Corporation. The company wasn't built by my grandfather alone. Susie stared at him. What are you saying? There was another founder. Before he could continue, footsteps echoed along the gravel path. A maid hurried toward them. Mr. Power, she said nervously. The chairman is asking for both of you. Rocco exchanged a glance with Susie. They're moving faster than I expected. The study was silent when they entered. Grandfather stood by the fireplace with the family lawyer. On the desk lay a thick envelope. I've received preliminary findings, the old man said. The laboratory confirmed the report was fabricated. Renzo, standing opposite them, kept his face carefully composed. There has to be some misunderstanding. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. There is another matter. He opened the envelope and removed several bank statements. Whoever ordered the forged report paid through a shell company. Renzo folded his arms. And the shell company was dissolved yesterday. Grandfather's eyes narrowed. Someone tried to erase the trail. The room fell quiet. Then Susie noticed something. One of the statements bore a familiar logo. She froze. That's impossible. Everyone looked at her. She stepped closer. This company. She pointed at the page. My father investigated it years ago. Rocco's eyes widened. You recognize it? She nodded slowly. I found documents with this logo among my father's belongings after he died. I never understood what they meant. Grandfather's grip tightened on his cane. For the first time, his stern expression gave way to surprise. So those files still exist. Renzo's composure cracked. You kept them, he blurted out. The room fell silent. He realized too late what he'd revealed. Susie looked directly at him. You knew about my father's investigation. Renzo didn't answer. He couldn't. Grandfather turned toward him, his voice cold. Explain why you know about documents that were never discussed in this family. Renzo remained silent. For the first time, it wasn't Susie or Rocco forcing him into a corner.
It was his own mistake.
And somewhere inside the Power estate, someone else was listening. Someone who had been waiting years for the truth about the company's founding to surface. Grandfather slowly lowered the documents onto the desk. The disappointment in his eyes was far more terrifying than anger. Renzo, he said quietly, leave. Grandpa, I can explain. I said leave. For the first time in years, Renzo's confident smile completely disappeared. He walked out under the silent stares of every family member. By evening, the investigation was complete. The laboratory released its official findings. The signature was forged. The report was fabricated. The payment trail led back to one of Renzo's private companies. The family lawyer presented everything to the board. There was no room left for excuses. Within 24 hours, Renzo was suspended as executive vice president. His access cards were deactivated. His company email was locked. His shares remained in his name, but his voting rights were frozen pending further investigation. The announcement spread through PWL Corp. Executives who had once rushed to flatter him suddenly stopped answering his calls. Assistants who used to greet him with smiles lowered their heads and hurried away. The office he had decorated like a throne was emptied before sunset. Then came Tiara. She stormed into his penthouse. You told me everything was under control. It was. She threw a newspaper onto the table. The headline read, PWL executive suspended amid forgery investigation. You promised you'd inherit the company. Renzo grabbed her wrist. This isn't over. She yanked herself free.
No.
She laughed bitterly. It is. You only wanted me because you thought you'd win. I wanted the future, Mrs. Power. She looked around the luxurious apartment. Not the girlfriend of a disgraced executive. She slipped off the diamond bracelet he had bought her. It landed on the marble floor with a sharp crack. I'll keep the handbags. But everything else? She smiled coldly. Consider it compensation for wasting my time. She walked out without looking back. The apartment door slammed. Renzo stood alone. For the first time in his life, no one remained beside him. Over the following weeks, more evidence surfaced. The forged report was only the beginning. Internal auditors uncovered fake invoices, questionable expense accounts, secret payments to shell companies. Each discovery chipped away at the image Renzo had spent years building. His grandfather signed one document after another, removing him from committees, revoking his authority, freezing discretionary trust payments. Finally, the board voted. Renzo was removed from every leadership position within the company. His office nameplate was taken down before the meeting had even ended. A month later, he returned to the estate to collect the last of his belongings. Servants who once bowed respectfully simply opened the door and waited. No one carried his boxes. No one offered help. As he walked through the lobby, employees continued working as though he didn't exist. The silence hurt more than insults ever could. Near the entrance, he saw Susie and Rocco discussing renovation plans with the chairman. The old man was smiling. A genuine smile. One Renzo had spent his entire life chasing. He stopped walking. Grandfather noticed him. Their eyes met for only a second. Then the older man turned back to Rocco, without saying a word. That single gesture told Renzo everything. He was no longer the heir. He wasn't even worth acknowledging. He carried the final box to his car himself. As the estate gates closed behind him, he looked once in the rearview mirror. The mansion grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Only then did he realize the truth. He hadn't lost because of Rocco. He hadn't lost because of Susie. He had lost because every lie he built his future upon had finally collapsed under its own weight. Renzo refused to accept defeat. Within days, he began contacting old business allies, convinced that someone would help him get back on his feet. One by one, they declined. Some claimed they were too busy. Others never returned his calls. The few who did answer all said the same thing. We can't risk doing business with someone under investigation. His reputation, once his greatest asset, had become a liability. Then the authorities arrived. The forensic audit uncovered more than forged medical records. Several shell companies tied to Renzo had been used to divert corporate funds into private accounts. He insisted they were legitimate consulting fees. The accountants disagreed. So did the investigators. Bank records, contracts, and emails painted the same picture. Renzo wasn't just unethical. He had broken the law. He was arrested outside his luxury apartment in full view of reporters. The footage spread across every business news channel in the country. The polished heir to the power fortune was led away in handcuffs. The civil lawsuits came next. PWL Corporation sued him to recover the diverted funds. Shareholders filed claims for losses caused by his misconduct. Former business partners demanded repayment of outstanding debts. The court froze nearly all of his assets while the cases proceeded. His sports cars were repossessed. His investment accounts were frozen. The penthouse he'd flaunted at charity galas was sold to satisfy creditors. Designer watches, artwork, and expensive collectibles disappeared one by one at auction. Tiara watched the news from a cafe. She quietly removed every photograph of the two of them from her social media. When reporters called, she offered a brief statement. Our relationship ended some time ago. I have no involvement in his personal or business affairs. She never visited him. She never answered another call. Months later, judgment was entered. Renzo was convicted of financial fraud and document forgery. He received a prison sentence, was ordered to pay substantial restitution, and was permanently barred from serving as a director or officer of a company. Everything he had schemed for was gone. The inheritance, the company, his reputation, his freedom. Susie attended none of the hearings. She had no interest in watching him fall.
She simply wanted to live.
She finished university. With Rocco's support, but on her own merits, she started a foundation that provided legal aid and emergency housing for people escaping abusive relationships. When reporters asked why she had chosen that cause, she smiled gently. Because everyone deserves a second chance before it's too late. She never mentioned Renzo's name. He was no longer worth carrying in her heart. Years later, on a quiet autumn afternoon, Susie and Rocco walked through the gardens of the restored power estate. The old chairman watched them from the veranda, smiling as children laughed across the lawn. For the first time in decades, the estate felt peaceful. Rocco slipped his hand into hers. No more secrets, he said. No more schemes, Susie replied. They walked forward together. Behind them, the gates of the estate closed softly. This time, they weren't trapping anyone inside. They were closing forever on the life that Renzo had destroyed, and on the future he would never reclaim. A year after the trials ended, spring returned to the power estate. The roses lining the garden paths were in full bloom. For the first time since her rebirth, Susie walked those paths without looking over her shoulder. She no longer woke from nightmares of smoke and fire. Those memories had finally begun to fade. Behind her came familiar footsteps. You walk faster every day, Rocco said. She smiled without turning around. You used to complain I walked too slowly. I was trying to match your pace. She laughed softly. Liar. He caught up beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I made this one. Susie accepted it. I've been practicing. She took a careful sip. It was terrible. She tried to keep a straight face. Rocco watched her expectantly. Well, she swallowed with great effort. I think you should stick to running a company. For a second, he simply stared at her. Then he laughed. A genuine, carefree laugh she had never heard in either lifetime. She laughed with him until tears formed in her eyes. That evening they visited the cemetery together. They placed fresh flowers before the graves of Susie's parents. The wind rustled gently through the trees. Rocco bowed respectfully. I'm sorry I couldn't protect your daughter sooner. Susie quietly slipped her hand into his. You did. He looked at her. In the end, you came into that fire. His eyes clouded with old pain. I was too late.
No.
Tears shimmered in her eyes. You still came. I remembered. She squeezed his hand. And in this life, you came even earlier. Months later, the old chairman called the entire family together once more. Everyone assumed it was another business meeting. Instead, he looked at Rocco and smiled. Have you kept everyone waiting long enough? Rocco blinked. Grandpa. The old man snorted. You've been looking at that girl like she's the only person in the world since the day you came home. The room burst into quiet laughter. Even Susie blushed. Rocco stood, walked around the table, then stopped in front of her. From his pocket, he took out a small velvet box. I had a speech prepared.
He sighed.
But every time I look at you, I forget it. Susie laughed through her tears. So improvise. He smiled. In my last life, I couldn't save you. In this life, you saved me. He opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum ring. No schemes. No lies. No one deciding our future for us. Just us. Susie, will you marry me? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached up and touched his cheek. I already married you once. His brows furrowed. She smiled. In the fire. You refused to let go of me. You stayed until the very end. Her tears finally spilled over. So this time, I'd like a happier ending. Yes. Of course I'll marry you. The entire room erupted into applause as Rocco slipped the ring onto her finger. Then, with everyone cheering around them, he kissed her forehead. My wife, he whispered. My husband, she answered. A year later, beneath the same crystal chandelier where Renzo had once begun his cruel deception, Susie stood in a flowing white wedding dress. This time, there were no lies hidden behind smiling faces. No traps. No manipulation. Only family and friends who genuinely wished them happiness. As Susie walked down the aisle, Rocco's eyes grew red. When she reached him, he took both her hands as though afraid she might disappear. You look beautiful, he said quietly. She smiled. So do you. The officiant finished the ceremony. You may kiss the bride. Rocco looked at her for a moment, almost as if asking permission. She nodded. He kissed her gently, warmly. Nothing desperate, nothing stolen, just a promise. As applause filled the hall, Susie rested her forehead against his. Do you know my favorite part of being reborn? She whispered. What? The ending changed. Rocco smiled. No. He intertwined his fingers with hers as they turned toward the people waiting to celebrate with them. The ending didn't change. It's only just beginning.